Kansas State has been on a bit of a recruiting heater with 4 prospects in the boat from the state of Texas.
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into this crossover edition of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On the Portal. I'm your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst. Thank you for coming in here and checking out all the latest news to get all the information on recruiting, the portal, NIL. It is a very busy time in the college football year. So let's get to it. We're going to be talking about Kansas State picking up not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 commitments from the state of Texas in the last week. What has gotten into the Wildcats and what's next? To help me figure that out, Rauh from Locked On Kansas State. Man, I didn't see 4 from Texas coming, Christian, and thank you for joining me today on this crossover, Locked On the Portal and Locked On Kansas State. Did you get rumblings like this was going to happen? Like, getting Texas players is a big deal for any program, but like K-State especially, as isolated as they are from some of the talent. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, not 4. I didn't have 4 on my bingo card right away. I think Kansas State's definitely on a heater, especially early on these official visits that just started in the beginning of June. But look, at the end of the day, when you're talking Big 12, you have to win in Texas. The Texas is the heart of Big 12 recruiting. You better win in Texas. Simple as that. So I really like what Kansas State's doing right here. I think they're doing a really good job, especially on the offensive line. I got a lot of thoughts on that process, and a left-handed quarterback that really makes you double take. Like, he could be a future good quarterback in the Big 12.
Yeah, this is a unique situation of not just getting 4 kids from Texas, but they're meeting needs. This is a class they want to really hit the offensive line. In every class, it's important to get somebody that can help you at quarterback. And this young man, 6A, level 2 state championship, Vandergrift High School out of Austin. We were just watching some of his film. You know what? He's throwing it around in Dallas Cowboys Stadium for touchdowns. He had 19 touchdown passes just in the playoffs last year in Texas. He was at 77% in the playoffs. I mean, just absolutely went nuts. Look, everybody wants to talk about the ability to win football games with offense and throwing around, but you got the linemen with them. This is good. So let's just kind of go over the list a little bit and some of the players that they have committed. What is it that you like best? Let's start with some of these. I don't really matter to me which one we go with, but the one that most people want to talk about is Miles Teodecki, the quarterback. What did you like about his film, and what do you think about him as a player overall? He's a left-handed quarterback, again, which is a little unique, but what did you think of him?
Yeah, I mean, watching him as a left-handed quarterback is definitely unique. What I liked about him, and some of his offers show that as well, is he looks like he's got really high football IQ, and we're starting to see some of his offers that he did receive. A lot of them came from the Ivy School, right? So Yale, Brown, Cornell, Penn, Princeton, Harvard. He received all of offers from there. So smart kid. That really sounds like it's translating to the football field as well. Kansas State was really one of his only Power 4 offers. He received one from Cincinnati as well. Everybody else was more in the G5 level. I don't know if that really makes you concerned at all, or just they found a diamond in the rough. But overall, I really like what I see from him. You mentioned what he did in the playoffs. Overall, in his season last year, he had almost 3,300 yards passing, 52 total touchdowns, including 48 of them from passing. 52 total touchdowns, 48 passing. Make sure I said that right. And he completed 70% of his passes. I think he's impressive. And he's joining a quarterback room that not only has Avery Johnson, but you talk about a guy like Dylan Duff, Blake Bennett, add Miles Teodecki into that. Every single one of those quarterbacks, excluding any transfers that have came in, have either played in or won their state championship at starting quarterback in high school. So you're bringing in a championship caliber roster to your quarterback room, at least at the high school level. And I think that's important, especially when you're talking about being a top end Big 12 school.
Yeah, I think it also matters that Teodecki, just to his point, he's doing it in Texas. That state, when it comes to football, they shed no expense. Like, I've been to numerous programs down there. Their facilities are like colleges. And I mean that in a literal sense.
I believe
it's really incredible. So what he was able to do, and again, he played pretty well in the regular season last year, don't get me wrong, but in the playoffs, Against better competition, he went into another gear. State title game, he had a couple really, really good throws down the field. And some of the things I liked about him the most were his ability to throw the ball deep, but also to throw it in between the safety and linebacker. You talked about his football IQ. Most high school guys trying to do that, it doesn't end well. The ball goes the other way. He's able to throw that second level ball where he just kind of drops it in over the top. It's really hard even for NFL quarterbacks to do. And it's one of the reasons, like, I'm a little surprised that his rankings aren't different. Like, Rivals doesn't even have him ranked. And he's from Austin. It's not like he's from a small school out in West Texas. So I have a feeling that's going to change a little bit in the very near future. We'll see what happens with him with that. Talk a little bit about the two offensive linemen, whichever one you want to jump on. I know you knew a little bit more about them. Give me your take on what the two guys that are pledged to the Kansas State Wildcats.
Yeah, Keegan Collins, Justin Morales. I think overall, I think that these two are great offensive linemen. I'm really excited to them come into the program. We'll talk Keegan Collins first. In my opinion, I think he checks a lot of the boxes of what Kansas State looks for. He's got a big frame. Brian LePeck seems to have a type of Brian LePeck, the new offensive line coach for Kansas State, seems to have a kind of brand, a fit for what he's looking for when it comes to offensive linemen. He really looks for multi-sport athletes. He can, he did the shot put in high school. He can move in space. I think he's scratching the surface in high school. I really do like where he's coming from, that athletic background. I think he's got good movement. I think he's got a natural high center of gravity, but I don't think that's a big problem. I think he can move. I really like his physicality. Morales, what I really like about Morales is, again, a multi-sport athlete, also did the shot put, but he's got huge arms. I think you see him more as an interior guy, 81.5-inch wingspan at 265. I think actually that number is a little higher. I think he was up to 275, almost 280 for his official visit at 6'4". I think both these are easily Power 4 caliber prospects that could not only just see them as a chance to get in for Kansas State and make some sort of contribution, but I think you could see them as multi-level starters in the future.
Well, that's the difference. When programs like Kansas State make that move up the ladder, historically, even back to the Bill Snyder days, they've always been able to bring in offensive linemen. That's important, not just now, but back then, and it will be in the future as well. And for whatever reason, Kansas State has evaluated O-line unbelievably, because they don't get the five-star kids very often, but they develop them, they redshirt them, they take them through the program, and they end up winning with junior seniors and fifth-year seniors. But if you do it every year, you can go that route. Some schools don't do that as well, but Kansas State has really done that. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about Kansas State's most recent commitment. What's next for Kansas State? Is this going to be a historic class for the Wildcats? That is next on Locked On Kansas State crossover with Locked On the Portal. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and taking control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. It's easy to collaborate with your partner as well. Instead of keeping all your capital in different places, you can track your personal accounts, set goals, and more under Monarch Money without all the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. All right, Christian, back here on this edition of Locked On Kansas State crossover with Locked On the Portal. Thank you to everybody that has made this your first listen each and every day. We truly appreciate it. I'm curious, before I ask you about the last kid, there's a young man out of the greater Houston area we're going to talk about. Are you surprised that Kansas State has focused on Texas, or is this what you thought it would be? I thought this is what they should do, but I didn't know if they would, because some coaches want to recruit certain areas and some don't. What's your thoughts on recruiting Texas for the Wildcats?
I think that's a really good way to put it. I don't know if that's what I expected, but I'm glad that's the route they're taking. Because as I mentioned earlier in the show, I think you can't win the Big 12 unless you win the state of Texas. And you don't have to out-recruit teams and programs like Texas or even Oklahoma at that in the state of Texas. But I think you really need to make yourself a presence and plant your flag, if you will. It's not about just getting the player. It's about proving that Kansas State can go head to head with Texas Tech and Baylor and TCU for that talent. And I think it boosts your awareness Texas is a hotbed for recruiting. There's no doubt about that. So I really like where they're going here. And you have probably the most expertise when it comes to recruiting and it comes to the transfer portal. Would you agree with me that, even if they don't stick with Kansas State forever, let's just say, you're building these relationships in Texas that give you a second shot in the portal when it comes to these recruiting kids? If kids leave home, they want a new fit, they remember who recruited them right. Kansas State's presence in Texas is going to pay off twice. What do you think about that?
Well, I think the portal is a big part of what K-State's got to do. Even when Snyder was there, they utilized the junior college ranks probably better than any program in the country. So it's a different form of transfer, but it's the same principle. And, of course, the state of Kansas has multiple junior colleges. But so does Texas, and so many of the kids, especially skill spots, receiver, DB, running back, those spots, you got to go through a bunch of them anyway. Recruiting there is going to help you in general. The kids are a little bit more developed, so you're going to get more impact players. I just don't see how you wouldn't want to go there for that part alone. And then you mentioned it. A lot of kids, if you recruit Texas, like you go into one of those high schools, I'll give you an example. The kid we were talking about, Tanner West, he's from Jordan High School in Katy, which Katy, as far as a football town, is about as good a town as there is in the country. It's on the west edge of Houston. If you go to that high school, the coach is probably going to be able to tell you about 20 kids, 30 kids, something like that in the greater Katy area, some that are at junior college, some that are going to be transferring, etc. If you stay in that community and you keep recruiting the Lone Star State heavily, you're going to find a few other kids that you didn't even know about just by going to Texas. It's the same thing like Duncanville or Westlake and Austin, etc. There are certain programs you go to, you can get the landscape of what's going on just all around, not just in that one school. So, yeah, I don't see why you would not recruit Texas, because the overall benefits are just too big. And anybody that doesn't go with that, like Ohio State recruits Texas hard. Notre Dame does. Penn State has even dipped its toe into Texas. Georgia recruits it hard. UCLA, USC historically recruited hard. It's a great move. And as you noted, that's the heartbeat of the Big 12.
Yeah.
So you're going to be going up against these kids if you don't recruit them. So might as well get them on your side instead of looking at them across the field. So I think it's smart overall. Tanner West plays at Jordan High School. He's a receiver, kind of like the quarterback commitment. He's a kid that's got a lot of academic offers, et cetera, kind of a late bloomer. But Katy Jordan is an elite program. They always have a lot of talent. So they've gotten a Houston kid. They got an Austin kid, got a kid from out in West Texas, got a kid from the north part of Texas. The entire state in this little run here is covered. Last year, I know they got a little bit out of Texas, but I'm getting the sense, because you got four, for lack of a better term, Kansas State staff is like, okay, we're going to take this to the next level with the Lone Star State. And West, again, they're not stupid from recruiting from Katy Jordan. The kid will come in, he'll be more polished, he'll be more ready to contribute. He's not even ranked by like some of the services. I guarantee you that is not going to be the way it turns out in terms of his production. That program knows what it's doing, and Houston area kids are always pretty darn good anyway. Is there anything that you're surprised about here? Like, I know they're trying to get Ian Premier and a few other kids locally, but where else is Kansas State trying to get their foot in the door? Is it just Texas, and locally? What's the word?
Well, it looks like Texas is still happening, and I'll add a little bit more to Tanner Wester before I switch over to that. I don't know if he's going to be a wide receiver. I think he's going to wind up actually being a running back on this roster.
Wow.
He's got a really good relationship with running back coach Brian Anderson, one of the reasons why he committed. And he did a little bit of everything at Katy for that. And that is mainly because of, as you mentioned, the talent that was probably in front of him as well. As a high school junior, he did a little bit of everything. He did that really good. He was great out of the backfield. He did great as a wide receiver. It goes back to my thought process of what I look for on players, especially in the offensive side with high football IQ. And you can play both spots like that at a pretty high level. If you're potentially being a running back or a wide receiver, at the Power 4 level. That's impressive to me. So I think they actually recruited him as an athlete, but I think when it's all said and done, I think we'll see him in the running back room, which is important because Kansas State's losing DJ Giddens this past year. They're going to change and have to contribute in the aggregate, in my opinion. They're going to have 2 or 3 running backs make a huge push forward. And I think there's not I'm trying to make this the best words here. Freshman running backs have made early impacts before with Chris Klieman and with Brian Anderson. So it wouldn't surprise me, not saying he would be the starter over Dylan Edwards or Joe Jackson or something like that, but it would not surprise me if right away we see him at more than just a special teams player his freshman season. It would not shock me at all.
Well, Kansas State's recruiting class is starting to shape up, but I still have a few questions for you about what overall Kansas State needs to do to take that next step, because okay, you got Avery Johnson on your roster for 1, maybe 2 more years. If he blows up this year, you might go to the draft because physically he has everything.
I agree. Yeah.
What do they have to do at Kansas State to take that next step from a baseline level to avoid that once every 4 or 5 years where they fall off? What do they have to do? That's what we're going to talk about next on this crossover, Locked on Kansas State and Locked on the Portal. All right, Kansas State, do you think they, quote unquote, met their expectations last year overall? I know there were some certain points. They were up and down. They were hard to figure out. Part of that was Agree being, first year starter and all that. But let's start with that. With the recruiting they've had, you've got Klieman and that staff. They've done some good things trying to maximize their talent. But did they meet expectations in 2024? Then we'll get into 25.
Do I think they met expectations? I'm going to say no. I think initially they did. They started 7-1 in year 1 of Avery Johnson, trying not to be Will Howard, right? Trying to take over the reins of not being Will Howard or Adrian Martinez and just trying to make that team his own. And then the wheels fell off in Houston. And that was a weird game for you to fall off on because Houston wasn't a great program last year, but that's where it happened. And then they wind up finishing the season 8-4 after a 7-1 start. You lose to Arizona State as well. You lose to BYU. I mean, you lose to good teams with the exception of that Houston game where it all just kind of crumbled apart. I do think in the second half of the season, Avery Johnson wasn't 100%. We haven't heard for certain if that's the case, but especially in that Colorado game, I just didn't. We stopped seeing him be a dual threat quarterback for most of it. So I didn't like that towards the end. But going into this new year, Brian, I think that the momentum hasn't been higher. And you're adding this little tiny chip on your shoulder, and it might be smaller than tiny for this program. You talk about the transfer portal before you get to the recruiting class. Retention was huge, and that was gigantic for this team. We thought players were going to leave, like Jace Brown. There was the possibility of Dylan Edwards leaving. There was these rumors. I mean, the Jace Brown rumors happened a day before the bowl game. He squashed it like a few hours before the game even started and then wound up sticking around. So I think the retention part's huge. They show that they believe in this program. They want to run it back. They want to go for a Big 12 championship, and they obviously have the talent to do so. That's where the momentum started in that Rate Bowl game against Rutgers, a nice comeback win. And I think that momentum is still rising up all the way through spring and hopefully heads into fall camp. The recruiting class last year was historic, and I think you can add to that in 2026, but it was one of the best recruiting classes they've ever had, if not the best. They brought in their best top prospect in the program's history in Lincoln Cure, who I think is going to be an absolute stud at tight end. I mean, he just won some state championships in track before he missed spring camp so he could, win some state championships. Sounds good to me because he put on some good football weight. He looks real good, put in some speed. I'm excited to see what Lincoln Cure can do. I think he's going to make an immediate impact. But then we talk about these 2026 class right here, adding these Texas guys, especially focusing in the trenches on the offensive line, which I don't think they're done with the offensive linemen, especially in the state of Texas. To add more, to answer your question, the short question in long form here, I think what they need more is to focus maybe a little bit more on the defensive side, maybe get a couple more corners, maybe some secondary, which there are some players to talk about there, and just to solidify the fact of having some studs, some dudes getting ready to develop in the system. The fact that they have done so well in retention And the fact that this 105 roster thing is gone, now that we are gone with that whole revenue thing, the judge has pushed that aside. We don't have to worry about that 105 roster size. You can really focus on bringing in the right players for this program, developing them, and not worrying about having to cut them or having too big of a freshman class when it's all said and done.
I think that's really important. Yeah, for a program like Kansas State, they've had walk-ons forever. So I don't know.
I didn't even bring up walk-ons. Good point.
Yeah, it's part of it. Like, I mean,
sure.
it's crazy. Like Baylor, that receiver they had that's a stud, he was a walk-on. Every now and then he had like 10 touchdowns last year. He didn't have a scholarship out of college.
Jacob Parrish just got drafted to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the 3rd round last year. He was a walk-on for Kansas State.
There you go. Again, Snyder was the master at that stuff. Special teams guys ended up starting as seniors, 5th-year seniors. If you got drafted, Kansas State somebody should do their dissertation on how to use a walk-on program. They did a great job forever. So it's kind of cool that it's still around. But I don't know when that's going to change. But as for 25, to help this 26 recruiting class, what do you think Kansas State has to hit in terms of a win-loss total to kind of, for lack of a better phrase, make it easier to solidify the class, keep kids in it while you still add a few more guys, especially recruiting in Texas, man. You know, if the Longhorns come calling or A&M or somebody late, that's hard. And I get it. What do they got to do this year on the field to help solidify the recruiting class?
Yeah, and you add into the whole mix of Texas Tech not being afraid to spend literally everything, right? So that's also something that comes into play. Look, Kansas State's NIL has been really nice right now. They've done a really good job with that. So I will put that caveat out there. But if I had to say what a record would be, and this is assuming that everything goes right, no injuries, especially to a guy like Avery Johnson, I would say the floor is 9 wins. You kept going. You've gone 8-4 2 years in a row. I think you'd have to see improvement. I would say the absolute floor is 9 wins. I think you got to get to double digits though. I mean, find yourself to get into contention for the Big 12 championship. Find yourself on the doorstep of getting into the college football playoffs, if not actually getting in. I think 10 wins obviously gets you to battle for Dr. Pepper for the Big 12 championship. But I do think that, we'll see what happens if they allow a second Big 12 team in at 10 wins. We don't know. That didn't happen last year. We'll see if that's the case moving forward. I think 10 is the number, but I think you could get away with 9 if there's no injuries. Now, if they have a down year, they get to 7 wins, they get to 8 wins. You might see some of these recruits decide to open up their commitment again, not because they don't see for the 3rd year in a row any kind of improvement. 2 years of 8 wins after winning the Big 12 championship in 2022. If you get a 3rd year of that could hurt your recruiting for sure.
It's not good in the sense that you start with Farmageddon, but then again, it is, because if you win that game, it's a catapult. It's a catapult.
Sure. Yes.
But if you win that game, you've got North Dakota. That's a trap game, but don't get me started on that stuff. You got Army. You should win that game. You go to Arizona. I know they've got experienced quarterback, but so does everybody in the Big 12 this year. It's like 12 or 13 guys. It's insane.
It's impressive. The Big 12 quarterbacks
really
are
rare.
impressive.
Like, I don't know if I've ever seen this many quarterbacks that have starting experience in a league. Even like Dampier, the kid that went to Utah, we'll talk about that in a second, is coming back. You've got UCF at home. That should be a win. I think the first game that you play on the road where it's like, okay, you're going to have to figure it out is the Baylor game.
Yep.
Baylor's going to be good. They've got an NFL level quarterback, in my opinion, and that's on the road. Yep. If you win that game, you've got a great chance to be in the Big 12 title. Kansas State, they always seem to be by the middle of the season, they're in the hunt. But if you win that game, you might be the fave. And then at the end of the year, this is where it gets really interesting. Like Oklahoma State last year was a disaster. They're not going to be that bad at 2nd year in a row. They're not.
Yep.
On the road, you go to Utah. They've got Dampier, the kid that transferred in from New Mexico, and then you finish the season against Dion. I'm picking Colorado to win the league just because I think they've got a ton of good transfers and just kind of taking a wild guess, but they could finish 10th too. They got an incredible coaching staff. They have like 3 Hall of Famers on their staff. It's insane.
Right. Yeah. I agree with everything you said about the schedule except Colorado. I'm not on the Colorado train. I think they're more towards I mean, you're right. We could see them be towards the top. We saw what Arizona State did last year. Everybody had them towards the bottom. They won the whole dang thing. I think the Colorado game is scary because I think it's the last game of the season. It could be the game where Colorado must win to make a bowl game. Like that's where
it could be.
That's where I think Colorado's at. So I'm not writing them off saying it's a sure thing win, but I'm right with you. I think Baylor's the scariest game on the schedule if they can get past Iowa State and run that gauntlet early in the non-conference schedule. Interesting on the North Dakota pick. I know that it's a tough, FCS playing an FCS game after Ireland has always been historically tough for some teams in the past. So I don't disagree with there, but at Utah, at Oklahoma State towards the end of the season, both those in a row. Hey, I'm right there with you. Utah and Oklahoma State were bad last year. That's not going to happen again, at least for one of those teams. This Big 12 has too much parity. I don't see that happening. That's why if you can get past Iowa State, I think 10-2 is absolutely doable. Saying you lose to Baylor, saying you lose to one of those Utah, Oklahoma States and still find yourself in the Big 12 championship. The fact you don't have to play Arizona State, the fact you don't have to play BYU, even with the whole Jake Retzlaff allegation thing going on right now, I think is a blessing in disguise. Before the allegations happened, my prediction was 10-2 with Kansas State taking on BYU. I'm leaning towards it being Kansas State, Arizona State now. Just because there's a lot of unknowns with BYU right now, which is going to cause more than just a quarterback controversy. We'll see what happens in the future there. Obviously don't want to speculate, but you obviously have to know there's a lot more to it, BYU, than just the legal issues, the whole honor code thing. But you're right, man. The schedule is super interesting, but I do think 10 is the number. 9 at the very least. I think if I could go on my show at a 9-3 season, and I think I can talk good things. But if we go to 8-4 and there's not massive injuries and we're right back in the same spot we were the last 2 years, I don't think there's a problem. Like, I don't think there's going to be coaching changes or anything, but I do think I'm going to have some videos and some episodes where I'm talking about players decommitting.
Yeah, it would be a difficult situation to sell because Avery's a second-year quarterback and you're further along in your systems. Like the players know the offensive playbook, the defense, it's further along. There's really no reason for them not to. But the other game, we didn't even mention it. Of course, it's the in-state rivalry game. Rock Chalk Jayhawk on the road. I know people that was in the spot. They hate Kansas, whatever. They got their quarterback back. They can score. They have a very good head coach. And it's in Lawrence. That game is not friendly. No matter how you look at it, if both these teams were terrible, it would probably be very competitive. But they could be two of the top 4 teams in the Big 12, and it wouldn't shock anybody. I don't think Kansas will be at that point, but they were so hard to figure out last year. It's really hard to put into perspective. And a lot of it, when their quarterback is healthy, that kid's dynamic, but he's also banged up all the time. So that game might be the pivotal point because it's right before you go down the stretch. He goes at KU, Texas Tech, at Oak State, at Utah, Colorado. Like the end of that right there, there's a lot of an emotional part of it. If you lose the Kansas game, that'll stick in your craw. So, yeah, well, I think that's important.
Well, I appreciate the softball to end this show here because it's been over 6,000 days since Kansas has beat Kansas State. It's been 16 winning streak for Kansas State. It's not going to end. And you said it's a rivalry. There's no rivalry there. The only rivalry with Kansas State is Farmageddon at week 0. You got to win. Kansas got to beat Kansas State in order to make it a rivalry. It's not there right now. So, and all jokes aside, I think that will be an interesting game. It'll probably be more interesting than it has in the last 5 or 6 years because there are some recruiting momentum that's happening with Kansas. There is some questions that can potentially make Kansas more towards the top, but I'm not counting that as one of my top 5 most important games this season because Kansas got to prove to me that they can stay with Kansas State. That hasn't happened for the last 16 games.
That's a long time. It's really hard to believe that it's at that level, but college football has weird streaks. It has weird streaks like that. They're unexplainable, but it is what it is. Christian, tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
Absolutely. Anywhere you can find the portal on podcast, YouTube, you name it. You can also find Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. We dive into everything K-Sports. We do it Monday through Friday, you name it. Multiple shows sometimes comes out during the week. We're getting ramped up to Farmageddon. We got Farmageddon Fridays. Nick Marvitz from Locked On Cyclones joins me every week. And of course, I get to join you, hopefully, in the future a lot more because we got a lot of recruiting to talk about. So Locked On Kansas State.
All right, man. I appreciate you coming on and doing the crossover with me today. You can find the Portal Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and wherever you get your podcasts. This has been the crossover, Locked On K-State and the Portal.